Hey, welcome to Fathering Our Future, the podcast for dads. I'm Anthony Vandegrift, and I'm not the perfect dad, but every day I am trying to be better. And I find that I have to try extra hard to be a better dad when my family is traveling, because when you're stuck in a tiny little vessel with those beautiful little angels, it can be a bit like battle. It's exhausting, and you can easily get annoyed and frustrated traveling with kids. While it is a joy that you get to think back on and just relive the wonderful memories and laugh at all the chaos in the moment, you really feel the chaos. But that's why I have a special interview to share with you today. I have my good friend Ryan O'Neill back with me. The first time he was on the podcast, he talked about his entrepreneurial journey. This time he's talking about traveling with kids. Now, he and his wife and their 3 young kids don't just do cross-country travel. They do big international trips. I mean, they do a lot of them, and they have no plans on stopping. So if you find that it can be a challenge traveling with your kids, you might want to take some notes on this one. Well, Ryan, it's so good to have you back on the podcast. Thank you so much for being with me, man.
Yeah, excited to be back and keeping up with everything. Excited to hear and chat a little bit about travel and stuff.
Yeah, I know you're basically an expert at this. I will say to everyone who might not know who you are, if you consider yourself to be an entrepreneur or you want to start a business at some point, you were actually on previously and shared your experience with that, and you had a lot of incredible insight. So if you're listening and you're thinking along those lines, and that's kind of, a passion of yours, or you have a dream of doing your own thing, Ryan O'Neill's interview that I did probably about a year ago now is a must listen to for you. But anyway, today we're talking about travel tips, because you and your wife have to be some of the bravest parents on the planet, because you take your kids all over the place. How many countries have your kids been to? You've got 3, so obviously the oldest is going to be to more, but how many have they been to?
Yeah, so I always like to joke my 2-year-old has more passport stamps than I did when I was 30, and yeah, so my 2-year-old, actually, she's been to 9 countries.
Wow,
My 4-year-old's been to 13, and my 6-year-old has been to 17 countries.
that is crazy. That's awesome, man. I I have a hard time kind of wrapping my head around the bravery that you and your wife have. So the most exotic thing that we've done with our kids is Lindsay and I enjoy taking cruises.
Oh yeah.
And we took Frankie on his first cruise. I think my wife was pregnant with Reagan. So we took Frankie, but when we took Frankie, we had my parents with us. So they helped with him. We took a second cruise, and it was just our family. And at that point, we had Frankie and Reagan. And I think my wife, again, was pregnant because, we did the whole boom, boom, boom thing. Um, and that was just us. And, cruises are kind of laid back for the most part. We enjoy going on cruises because you're isolated. We don't get Wi-Fi. We disconnect from the world. It's just, you kind of just relax. You really get away. And when you have kids with you, you can't really do that. and, and the problem for us is the last cruise that we went on for our 8-year anniversary, and we didn't take the kids with us. And it was the first time that we had been away, just the 2 of us without the kids. And I think we booked a cruise within the week of us getting back. That's just going to be the 2 of us. And I know that you can affirm that it's good for the parents to get away and have their own isolated vacation. But you and your wife have this extra bravery that I think the majority of parents probably do not have, in the fact that you've taken your kids, your oldest alone, to 17 different countries. I mean, your 2-year-old's been to 9. That's kind of remarkable. So what is it that you think is different for you and your wife compared to the vast majority? Because honestly, we at some point, I'm sure we will take our kids on a cruise, but I don't want to do it again for a long time. So what makes you different?
Yeah, well, I saw your avatar icon in this little podcast tool we have, has you with your kid on top of your shoulders. Is that Progresso? Is that the Progresso cruise?
It is. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I figured that was based on the cruise and based on the kind of
Yep.
temple looking thing,
That's
pyramid
exactly
looking
where
thing.
we were, man.
That's cool. Yeah. So you're not completely foreign to it, man.
I'm
You're
not, but he was.
yeah,
No, how old was he? Not even 2 in that one. So it's been
yeah.
4 years.
Yeah. Well, it's that's the thing for us. The heartbeat behind it is my company's fully remote, and so we have flexibility when it comes to that. But we could do like we did tonight, which was we had ate dinner and hung around the house, and then put the kids to bed an hour and a half later. Or we could do what we did when we were in. Um, Belize, which is we rode golf carts around the city, this like golf cart city in Belize for 3 hours and just like explored the city and got pupusas in Belize. And it was one of those things where we had the choice, right? Like, so what do we want to do? And that's a big thing for us is I guess kind of the biggest thing I heard many, many years ago, and it's always stuck with me. I don't know. I need to figure out who. I don't know if it's a quote or a saying, but basically they did a study of people who are in on the last years of their life and asked, how long was your life to these people? And they said the people that felt that they had longer lives were the ones who had more distinct experiences.
Mm,
Whereas the people who just went in and day out, clocked in, clocked out, did the same thing, felt they had such a short life. And that's what so much, I mean, that impacted me a lot to say, you know what, like maybe we just go in and do the same thing day in and day out. Or is there some way to make so many distinct memories and distinct experiences? And that's been a big driver behind us traveling so much, is because we've got memories of places and experiences and dirty diapers and things that are in other countries, right? Like that we wouldn't have. Like one of my son's birthdays, we were in Croatia and we had balloons in this little Airbnb, and I wouldn't remember that birthday if it was at home in his own room.
sure.
But I remember that birthday because it was in Croatia and we were on, the coast in Croatia. And so like there's just things like that kind of give us a much more vivid experience in remembering these things. And that's a big driver of it. And there's some horror stories for sure of traveling with kids. But
Oh,
at the
sure.
same time, it, that's the heartbeat behind why we love doing it so much. Is it gives us these experiences, it gives the kids experiences, it gives our family an experience that we won't forget. It's harder to forget it.
Yeah, that's a wise perspective to have. I know it's not always the most comfortable perspective to have because it's really easy to get stuck in the here and the now, and life is a little chaotic, and I just need to get through tomorrow. And you keep saying that for a decade, and you're like, where did the
Right.
time go? But your approach is, at the end of everything, I want to look back and say I had a life worth living. And
Right.
I think it's one of those perspectives that kind of pokes you in the chest, like, hey, dad, suck it up. It's gonna not be perfect, but
Right.
do
Right.
something that's going to be memorable. That's really cool. Now you mentioned horror stories. Real fast? How old is your oldest?
So my
How,
oldest is 6.
he's 6. So in 6 years, he's been that's remarkable to 17 different countries. So
Hmm.
you've been busy. Um, Now you do this a lot, but you mentioned the horror stories. Help the rest of us feel somewhat normal. Give us one of the horror stories that you've had traveling with kids.
Oh yeah, probably the one. There's plenty of them, but probably the one that sticks out the most is we were going to Ireland, and we this is our we travel a little bit with our son Oliver. I've got a picture of his first flight, and it is the most hilarious. He's a very chunky kid, and his eyes are like bulging out, like, and he did the flight was great. He did a great job on it, but just the picture like
Yeah.
sets up for like, all right, it's time to start traveling. So we had done some domestic travel, but we had never done anything overnight. He was um if I'm thinking of this right, a year and a half, something like that, for this longer trip. And so we're like, well, we're gonna take so many long haul trips when you're going over the pond, skipping over the pond,
Hmm.
are overnight. And so we're like, man, this is awesome. So we went up to Boston. We're gonna go from Boston to Dublin to Ireland, and he's 1.5 years old, and we're like, this is perfect because we're going to be leaving at like 8 p.m. and he'll fall asleep. And we did all of our planning, and we got like a bulkhead seat because you know this is one of those things that will totally trip up a early traveler, because we did this. We got a bulkhead seat, which is the front of a row of seats that sometimes you can lay down like a baby thing, and you can set the baby there to sleep. So we're like, man, we got the bulkhead, like everything. This is great. He's going to just fall asleep, and he's going to be asleep all the way till we get to Dublin. And so we got on the plane, everything happened as normal. We, had to coordinate and figure out, make sure we were seating. Somebody didn't want to sit next to a baby, so they moved, and they talked to the flight attendant and all that stuff. And we're like, well, whatever, we're here, we're doing it. My wife's pregnant at the time with our second. And so everything is going great, we feel like. And then the lights go off and we're like, okay, great, let's put him to bed. So we go through the bedtime ritual. Then all of a sudden, about 30 minutes later, the lights come right back on. And we're like, what is going on? And we didn't realize, like, this just happens, because now they're doing food service, or now they're like handing out drinks. And from that point forward, the flight just went down because our kid wants to sleep. We've not set him up or prepared him for like any sort of schedule change or anything like that. We just thought, this is going to be just like at home. He's going to go to sleep, be asleep overnight. And so the rest of the flight was pretty miserable. We couldn't lay down the bulkhead, the baby carrier on the bulkhead, because it impeded walkways. No. I remember it was turbulence. As soon as turbulence hit, you had to lift it up. So he during the 5 minutes he actually fell asleep in the thing, turbulence happened. We had to take him out to hold him while we lifted it up. And so, it was rough. It was rough. It was one of those like, oh, we're never going to do this again.
Right.
But, the thing is, we had such a great time. We got a picture of him holding a map upside down that's just stuck in my mind of like when we were in London, because we went from to Dublin to London and then over to France on that trip. And so, yeah, it happens, though. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah. Well, I think it's remarkable, which, we had a horror story going to Disney. We took the kids to Disney. I think Frankie he was about 2.5, and we thought maybe he was going to skip the terrible Two-Face.
Mm-hmm.
No, we went to Disney for 7 days, and he literally hit the entire terrible Two-Face throughout that 7-day period. It was awful. And then the flight home, the kids do really well in flights, but apparently he had some bad chicken nuggets at the resort before we left, and the last 30 minutes of the flight, he threw up 9 times.
Oh, no.
Dude, it was bad. I'm sitting here watching a movie on my iPad, and I just saw like this mass go in my peripheral, and I was like, what was that? And I look over, and then I felt the warmth of it. I was like, sweet Lord, be with us. Yeah. So,
how many chicken nuggets did you eat?
So it's like, all in all, I was like, I've told him, which I told him when he was, 2, but he doesn't get it. But I remind him every year. I'm like, buddy, last year, 2 years ago, we were at Disney, and I'm not taking you back until you're 31. So just you remember that. But
I remember I was at Disney Springs once, and I saw this kid just like sprawled out crying, like the mom's holding the ice cream while this kid. And I remember thinking, a lot of people say this is the happiest place on earth, and yet.
Yeah, there's tears everywhere.
There's so much crying.
See, but what I think is so remarkable about your story that you just shared, that was chaotic. That had to have been one of your first trips that you took, and you kept taking them.
Yeah.
You continued to do all these other trips. So just based off of that horror story, what are some things that you learned from that experience?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, we've learned a lot of stuff. We're still learning. I mean, we just came back from a trip to Spain, and on that, I have a 2-year-old, and I learned I used a trick that I learned. So one thing that I learned in the process, and I just learned this. This is 4 years later. I'm just now learning this trick. We were coming back from Hawaii, is what it was, and we were a similar situation with my daughter, where it's like we're flying from Hawaii. Her schedule's changing. She was less than 2 years old. She was still, at that point in time. So we have like we have companion passes on Southwest. So like at that point in time, we literally like paid for 2 tickets for 5 people to go to Hawaii, and it was super cheap for us. We were super excited. The food in Hawaii is super expensive, so you got to save money somewhere. But we were coming back, and my daughter was off, and she just was crying, and it felt like another one of those Ireland flights. And then I put her in the carrier. So we had a carrier that we put in. That's a big thing when you're traveling and stuff. But I put her in the carrier, and I went back to the bathroom. I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna let her cry it out in the bathroom and until she's worn out. And I figured out a trick that was in there where you go into the bathroom, you have the kid strapped on, and you literally like you half lock it. Because as soon as you full lock a bathroom door, the light comes on, right? So you don't want the light on. But if you half lock it, people can't open the door, but the light doesn't come on. So there's like this half lock trick that I learned
Well
while I was
played.
there. And she conked. She was out. And then I went, and for the next 3 hours on the flight or whatever it was, she was out. And it was something for an hour and a half, 2 hours. We were struggling with her, and she was having a hard time with it. But yeah, that was one of the tricks we learned. Is like, hey, I'm just going to take him to the bathroom. I'm going to stand up. The kid's going to be strapped to me, and kids are going to cry. But that's the best place to kind of avoid, disrupting other people. At the same time, helping the kid to get some sleep.
Yeah, I
So
think that's
that's one of the tricks that we've
yeah.
learned for sure.
I want to get into more of the tricks, but I think you said something that's really important for all of us dads to remember. You made the comment that kids are going to cry. I think it's
Yep.
really important. While going back to my cruise experience, when it's me and my wife, it's magical. When it's my entire family, it's a bit more chaotic, and there's a lot less rest that we get when we do that. But it's really important to have your expectations aligned with, I've got kids. These kids will cry. These kids will be uncomfortable. They are going to be off of a schedule. There's going to be moments of chaos. And just having that mindset that, I need to be able to adjust whenever they need me to adjust. This isn't all
Right.
about me. This is more about us, right? I think that probably goes in line with what you shared about your whole reason for doing this, right? You're making memories, you're having something you look back on, where you have this long and full life with all these distinct experiences that you've
Right.
had.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the thing is, you have to be so careful, because if something starts to go awry and you got people all around you, especially airplanes are always the worst, but cruises are just the same. If something starts to go awry, you get so tempted to try to be reactionary for other people's view of it. And sometimes that's the worst thing you can do, to help the kid through the situation. And what we found so many times, that most, like, me seeing other kids on the plane, most of the time, the reason kids are crying are things that are preventable. Like I remember one
Mm.
time, a kid was in front of me, was crying, and I could tell that their ears were popping because we were going down, and the parents had no idea. Had no idea. So I had a little thing of snacks left over from the snack bag or whatever that they passed out. And I said, hey, here's these. And the kid started eating it, and the kid was fine, right? It was nothing to do with their attitude or pitching a fit. Their ears were popping, and nobody was fixing it for them. And so
Yeah.
it's one of those things where, again, it's going to happen, but if the more you do it, number one, the more kids get used to it. But then number two, like the more that, if you're calm and cool and collected as a parent, you can be able to think through these situations and figure out, how can I kind of help things to end up as best as I can.
Yeah. I think that's super important. I want to get into these secret tricks and hacks that you have for traveling, since you're a professional traveling father with 3 kids and your kids have been around the world a couple times. Let's start first with maybe domestic travel, because this is probably going to be most applicable to the majority of families. And I know
Sure.
you've probably been to almost all the states, if not all of them already, with your entire family, but you're taking long car rides. What are some must have items to help your kids when, you're on the road for hours?
Right. Yeah. So we've done the long trips. We if we're going on a trip, like in our current van, we have a DVD player. We didn't used to have this. We have a DVD player in there, so that's one thing. Like, so we were traveling. We went from St. Louis to Chicago, which is only about a 4.5 hour, 5 hour drive. But we were flying out of Chicago to go to Barcelona, so that we were taking this really long trip up there. And my wife just went to the library, and she found DVDs of Inspector Gadget Goes to Rome and Inspector Gadget Goes to Barcelona, like the places we were about to go. And for like the week ahead of time, we were watching those videos, and then on the trip there, we just played them on repeat. And you don't want to get the kids too hyped up on videos the whole time, but there's educational ways. There's
Yeah.
fun ways that you can still be able to do it. So that's a big thing. If you can time it right, sleep is your best friend. Like schedule your trips around when the kids are going to sleep. And I found out my wife has this hack, and it took me years to figure out what she was doing. But we generally have the thing where the person's driving is driving, and the person who's not driving is responsible for the kids. So starting
That's
out,
why I always drive.
Right, exactly. And so Rachel and I will split up driving, and so we'll start driving, and I'll be going for an hour and a half, and she's timed it perfect so the kids fall asleep. Like we're leaving right at their nap time, or right at a time when they're most likely to fall asleep. And then she lays down and she takes a nap too. Then she gets up and we're talking, and then I'm like, man, would you want to trade? Can you drive a little bit? So then we'll trade. And I didn't realize how genius she was. And then just about that time, the kids wake up. And now I'm responsible for the kids. So wives out there, there's these tricks you can pull on your husband without even him realizing, but that's a big thing.
I'm going to edit that portion out for all the dads listening.
It's a big thing. Time around when they're sleeping. Make sure that you're taking whatever chunk of the trip. We generally don't do van trips more than 5 or 6 hours. We generally would prefer to fly. At some point, we almost went to Vermont this year because we could not find tickets for cheap. It was bad. We finally found some tickets that were doable, but that would have been the biggest drive we've ever done. So generally, we try to stick beneath 5-6 hours if we're going to be driving somewhere. But that's a big thing. Have snacks, prepared in there. My wife always does a great job at having a backpack, having a lot of toys in the backpack. That's another big thing. Just have a backpack full of toys. And we even just got each of them their own backpack. So we'll have them pack their own toys. And so that they're pulling the stuff out. They've got kind of their own little care package. And generally we don't stop very much if we're traveling. We'll try our best to be able to hit everything in one shot.
Sure.
And so that helps a lot of time. But those are a few of the things we do on drives.
Okay, that's smart. This is good stuff. What about when you get, I'm sure you probably fly more than you drive, considering all the places that you're traveling. But when you're in the air on the plane, anything different from that the kids need?
I mean, make sure they have, again, the backpack full of stuff, toys that they can play with. If you're doing a domestic flight, if you're doing a flight, less than 4 hours, that's a big thing. Make sure that they have snacks on the way up and the way down. At some point, they actually get really used to flying. And so there's some things they just kind of know. But having those snacks there, that's the majority of reason kids cry on planes. It's just their ears, and people don't know how to work with that. There is a level of, learning how to be a human that is around other humans and how to behave and stuff. And that stuff is stuff that comes. We generally, again, I don't want to make it sound like we depend on videos and stuff a lot, because we try our best to avoid being in there too much, but we generally try to make sure that we have that. We download videos from Amazon Prime or wherever. We try to download stuff ahead of time, so we won't get a lot of times you'll get in the air and realize hey, your download's expired. So you want to totally try that, right? Make sure you're getting that stuff prepared for them, stuff that they're going to watch in a pinch, and don't give them to it up front, right? Wait till the problem time to give it to them. If you give them you give them everything up front, they're going to expect another level, and you don't have anything else to give them. Right? Yeah. Exactly. So you wait till those moments. Make sure you always got a trick in your back pocket. Distractions are huge. Just all the time, if something's if you can tell that, and be observant of your kids, you can tell that something's about to go off. Make sure you're looking out and hey, what's that out the window? Finding a way to be able to distract them. I took my son on my first business trip with me the other day, and we actually did his schoolwork on the plane. Was something we did, and that caused a little bit of contention, so we had to work through that. But but we successfully were able to do like his math and his English and work through some of that stuff when we were on the plane. So having stuff to do, but then knowing, hey, when you travel a lot, you still have to do your schoolwork. Where our kids are homeschooled, but you still have to do your schoolwork. You still have to do X, Y, and Z, and and so if you don't travel that often, or if it's your first trip, don't worry about that. But if it's something where you want to get into that lifestyle, eventually you have to get to that point where this is just life. When
Sure.
my kids are Bible quizzing, we quote on the plane at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
It's like we're up. We
So
had Dunkin' Donuts
diehards.
this morning already. Let's do something.
That's awesome. I know you mentioned snacks. You mentioned snacks early on, and you mentioned it again for the pressure changing with the ears. Is there anything else that you do, or are you just always snacks? Because I know snacks work.
For pressure changing, my kids love what my mom does, which is like to hold your nose and to blow, and that helps your
Yeah.
ears. But snacks is the big thing for us. Again, depending on how big of a trip, a lot of people they want to bring a stroller, but there's times we need to ask like how accessible is that stroller going to be after we get to there, and
Yeah.
am I even going to use it? Because there are some terrains you go to, some places you go to where all you've done is created something else that you have to keep up with. And it's easier
Yeah.
just to be able to bring like a baby carrier or something like that. We haven't tried out one of the Wonder Carts or whatever they're called. We're looking, that's something we've considered to see how that looks pretty cool. Looks like it
Yeah.
could be pretty efficient, but we haven't tried out one of those yet. But a lot of times you find so many parents that they overpack. They way overpack, and now they got more headaches, and they're not able to take care of their kids because they're the only person who can push these 17 things around. So make sure you pack light. Like the more experienced traveler you are, this will blow your mind. We traveled. We went for 10 days, 12 days, something like that, to Europe, and we took one carry on and 3 backpacks. That was our
Wow.
everything for it.
Wow.
Now we weren't
I don't think you wear
dressing
clothes
up.
in Europe anyway, though, right?
That's right. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why
So let
you
our
wear the
baby just run
backpack.
around naked. Um, but like, I mean, we weren't dressing to the nines for anything. We weren't going anything formal. But still, we found a way to be able to wash it, and keep that light, because again, keeping the less you have to worry about, the more you can have attention spans whenever things and situations do happen. So, but yeah, if you want to take the stroller, obviously, a lot of times you have to like get a gate checked, and there's other things like that you just got to keep in mind. And sometimes it's the right move to do. Sometimes it's the right move to do. But generally,
Yeah.
like with lap children, we just sit them in our laps. We fly Southwest a lot, so there's an entire strategy we have about making sure that all of us get seats, together. We basically take up a whole row, and for the most part, we have 5 people that get tickets now with our family. For the most part, that we're going to get the empty seat on the plane. Every so often, 1 out of every 6 or 7 flights, we have somebody, just the plane's absolutely full and somebody's got to fit there. So that's a big thing, is just making sure, like, if you do fly in places that have uh, like seats that you have to select the seats, you gotta be very careful with that, because things can get messed up. We had a situation like that where my daughter, yeah, I could keep talking on that, but make sure you're very cautious, and you got to get the stuff in ahead of time to make sure, if you're choosing your seats, that you're actually getting those selected in time to make sure they fit the kind of the dynamics of your family. But there's other tactics and tricks if you're Southwest, for sure.
Yeah. We typically just use Southwest. Well, I guess for 2 reasons. One, bags fly free, which is always nice.
That's
You
true.
save a little
Sure.
bit of money there. The second reason is typically with kids, you get to board after
Right.
whatever the top group is. They're like, all right, if you've got kids under this age, come on. We're like, all right, here's our big group. And,
Oh yeah.
and typically, you get to just select your seats. There's like 20 people on the plane, and it's relatively easy to bunch together at that point. You were talking about overpacking and bringing the strollers and the car seats and all that nonsense. And I was traumatized because my wife's from Toledo, Ohio, and for the most part, we drive there. One time we said, no, we'll fly there because people have big enough vehicles. We only need 2 car seats, or 1 car seat at the time. It might have just been Frankie. And here I am walking through the airport with the big, like, car seat backpack
Oh yeah.
on. And, Frankie's in the stroller for the most part. But at some point you got to take him out. So then I'm carrying that, and I've got like 2 bags over here. And I'm like, I can't do this. Like my arms are not that big. Like I'm not strong enough for this. So yeah, if you can pack light, I'm going to echo that. It's definitely the way to go. Let me ask you this though, since you've been all over the place, is there a country that seemed to be best to travel to and visit with kids that was maybe more accommodating to have children with you?
That's so weird. That's such a tough answer. Such a tough question because some of the best countries for kids are like also the worst. And so I'll give you an example, like Italy. Coolest of things. Like we went to the Vatican to go to Vatican City, the Vatican Museum. We pulled up. It was free that day. It was the fifth Sunday or something like that. So it was free to go into. We had 3 kids. And they started to drop us off at the front, and like the cab did, but then they went. So they drove all the way down this block because the line had already extended around the block. They turned the corner, went all the way down another block. The line extended all the way down. They turned the corner again. It went all the way down another block, and it wasn't a full mile, but it was starting to get up there on the pedometer, like. And so we went all the way to the very end of the line. We're like, this is crazy. We're never going to get in. We got these kids. And we were Googling, hey, what do you do? And we saw that you can actually get in if you have kids, just you could walk straight in, like at the front. You didn't have to wait in the line. So we did. We walked all the way up there past everybody. We got to the front. We said, hey, is this right? Is this actually, I ran up there first. Typically when we're international, most of the time we only have one phone plan on. It costs like $10 a day to be able to have a phone plan on. But like in situations like that, I may turn on my phone to be in contact. But I ran all the way up and it was legit. They said, hey, you can get in. And so we didn't have to wait at all. Like we walked in and we're in the Sistine Chapel. Nobody else was there. We're in all these places. Like it was just completely empty because we were the first people in. So that's the coolest part. But then the flip side to that, like the quote unquote cool part, 7 hours before, I was standing in a hotel that was the nicest of the hotel. We used points. We were very hacky with points, and I figured out how to get it. It was a Waldorf Astoria. We could never afford it if we were paying it, but there was like this hack with points that I was using. But when we walked in, and I was trying to do something really special for my wife. It was a great view, a nice hotel. A lady immediately, super nice hotel. So I don't understand. She picked up her finger and she started counting our family, like in front of me. She said, sir, are all of y'all planning on staying in the room? I was like, well, yeah, I mean, it's double beds, this is fine. She's like, well, we only allow 3 people per room. I'm like, what? I've got a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and you want us to have 2 rooms. And they would not budge. They would not budge on it. And it's something in Italy, I don't understand it completely, where there's 3 souls, and I'm pretty sure the hotels use it for their benefit, but there is some sort of legal thing behind it. That was a horrible experience because we had already stressed ourselves, and we figured it out, and we had to do a lot of on the spot thinking, and I had to transfer points from one place to another, and they had to open up another hotel room, but because everywhere else was shut down. Every other hotel was completely sold out for that night. I don't know what was going on in Italy and Rome, but yeah, so it's like weird because it had the best of experience for families. You could get to the front of the line pretty much anywhere. So like all the stuff everybody wanted to do was super accessible. We went to the Colosseum. We went to all these places, super accessible, but the hotel situation was a mess. If you only have one kid, maybe that's actually easy. I would totally, if you have one kid and you're wanting to explore, do Italy. Absolutely. Yeah. We love Italy.
Lindsay wants to go to Italy. We're just going to, I don't know, we might just draw straws and pick one of the kids and just, here we go.
That's true. Well, what I did the second time, our second hotel, I actually just checked in myself and then we just went up to the room. Nice. But they were quick. My wife called down for like something like a pillow, and they're like, we don't have a passport for a woman on the room. Like they were quick on like catching it. So,
wow.
But I did that. That did work in that last one. But it's like you legit let one person go in and check in. And
how did you get out of that?
Out of what?
Out of them identifying the woman in the room. Did you call up and say this is a mistress? I'm sorry.
That's right. Oh, yeah, that's it. Ma'am, you can't know this. No. They just didn't follow up on it. We just
Oh,
didn't.
nice.
We just said, oh, okay, well, we'll if we get a chance, we'll come down later and bring the passport down. But we just never did anything with it.
Okay, nice.
Yeah,
Well, that worked out pretty good, but
yeah.
that's good to know the whole, 3 to a room in Italy. That's, that could hurt. That could hurt pretty bad
Oh,
if you don't know
absolutely.
about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like we went to Costa Rica. Costa Rica was super nice for kids. Everybody loved kids. Very very friendly. Um, One of the best if you're dipping your toe in travel, international travel, do like Dominican Republic, like Punta Cana, and do a resort, or do like you could do Montego Bay. We'd go again to Montego Bay. I have heard like crime's up a little bit, or I had heard a year ago that it was up a little bit there. But generally, if you're going on a resort, you aren't going to have any issues. Just get like an all inclusive resort,
Mhm.
and that's a great way to dip your toe into international travel, because you get the flight in, you get used to the passport control, and there's an entire technique around passport. Italy, though, passport control let you to the front of the line. Didn't matter how long the line was. Like
Wow.
in getting through security, you had your own line for kids. We just didn't. We've never really seen that in many other, or at least known about it in many other places. So,
Well,
but yeah, like those are some great places we love. We're going to go to Punta Cana at some point in the near future again, and Montego Bay was great for kind of dipping your toe into international travel.
so Italy sounds like the place to go. Just if you have more than 1 kid, make sure you hide the other 2
Yeah,
or however many in a suitcase until you get to the room.
yeah. If you're the Brady Bunch, make sure you're like just sending in Jana or whatever the daughter's name
Wow.
it was on there. Like just have
That's
one person in.
that's funny. Since you've traveled so many different places, what is the language barrier like? I know you're not fluent in every language that of every place you visited unless you have just memorized all that and you haven't told me about it, but what's that like?
Yeah. Oh, it's there for sure. I don't fluently speak anything. I can almost get around in Spanish. I thought I could until May of this year when we went to Puerto Rico, and I learned at this little sort of cheap Puerto Rican restaurant. Um, I do not have a handle, and nobody could speak English there. So like we figured it out. I got food, and I was able to pay for it, but it was a train wreck.
Got it.
Yeah, it's there sometimes. Generally, most of the time, if you're just dipping your toe into traveling, you're going to be traveling to places that there's not a significant language barrier. You know, if you're
Okay.
traveling anywhere in Europe, everybody can speak English. You travel, like we went to Belize, Mexico, Costa Rica. Most people are proficient enough, and especially
Right.
in hospitality, to be able to assist you. It's generally not a major concern of ours. I
Yeah.
mean, we'll look it up. I just got fined for driving in Spain. Somehow, I don't know. I broke some law while driving, and so, but then they sent me the fine, but it was completely in what is the language? Catalan, right? Like it's a mix of like Spanish and others, and like the entire fine's in Catalan, and so I have no idea how to read it. But I finally was able to get a hold of the rental car people, and they were able to explain to me that I didn't have to do anything on it.
Oh,
So
cool.
every so often you run across situations like that, but it's a great opportunity to learn, and
Yeah.
to learn yourself, to talk with your kids, and then to practice it, and that's
Gives you
that's
good
always like
stories to
nerve
tell.
wracking. Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let me get here because this is probably I would imagine that this is one of the biggest factors for families who want to get into traveling, specifically international travel. Let's talk about cost and savings. Do you have I know you talked about some of the situations you have with Southwest and looking at some other things, but what are some of the main things that you look at to save your family money when you're doing these international trips?
Yeah. So we have traveled um, for the longest time. I was in global missions. Actually, I was
Right.
in the executive office. That's what got me into international travel. Great story I could tell you about South Africa, but we don't have time. Um, but I got into travel through that. I really fell in love with it. But then I went on my own, and I started, obviously start my own software company. I mean, we were making around 40,000 a year between both of us. So I wouldn't, it's not what I started at, which was 28,000, but like whenever I started my career, quote unquote, as a teacher. But at the same time, we had two people, we had a house. We had a baby, and so it's not like we had a lot of money to rolling in for it, but we still were able to do it. And there's a lot of techniques for that. But for us, like one of them this has been a more recent thing, but there's something called Scott's Cheap Flights. It's becoming very, very popular.
Yep.
It's a great list to follow.
Okay.
But we went when my son was 3.5. My older son was 3.5. My younger son was 1.5. But there was a mistake fare from St. Louis to Croatia for like $300, and so
Wow.
for $900 or $1,000, our family of 4 traveled to Croatia, and that was an easy drive over to Venice, and that was our first time in Italy.
How'd you find that?
So they just sent an email. So they sent an email saying, "Hey, mistake fare," and we're like, "Hey, let's go check out this mistake fare."
Was that through
And
Scott's?
it was through Scott's Cheap
Okay.
Flights. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And sometimes those are weird, right? Because it's on some sort of like obscure site that somebody made the mistake.
Right.
So you got to be prepared for that. You don't plan everything. You need to wait for a week before planning the rest of your schedule if you get a mistake fare. But yeah, we saw the opportunity and we saw, hey, we can drive over here, we can rent a car, and we just planned it out in a way that we were able to create a trip. So don't schedule your trips like that sounds like so weird. Like everyone's like, "Oh, I want to take my vacation on this day." If you want to have cheap travel, then you need to be flexible. You need to know your schedule. Obviously, there's some things that probably aren't flexible, but you've got to be willing to say, "Okay, no, I'm going to adjust my schedule based off of the opportunities that come up." So that's huge for us. Is we've got all kinds of tips and tricks. There's some incredible stuff on Google Flights that allow you to do this, to very quickly look over a wide variety of dates and kind of find the best date for you. Like anytime that you can find a calendar view where there's actual dollar signs or dollar amounts on each day, like you've hit gold. Whether that's like the Hilton website, there's like an obscure way to find like the best deal on Southwest. There's like a calendar button that you can like sort of toggle around the dates on Google Flights. Like that's super, super important when you're doing the research for this, to find out, okay, what's the best day? And I'm going to adjust my schedule based off of, and when I'm going to take my vacation based off of that day. And then you have to map it across multiple factors. You got to need to look at your flights, but you also have to map it across your hotel. And then if you need any car or anything like that, which cars typically, rental cars or transportation are less critical than your flights and your hotels, and making sure that those are the cost efficient ways. So those are some things for us that we do that, and generally I just enjoy it. I just enjoy looking up flights and finding good deals. But those are some of the things that have really helped us make sure that we're getting the best deal whenever we're traveling.
Yeah, and it's really smart to do. Again, having the flexibility. Especially if you're doing what you recommend and looking at these dates, I would think for most people, again, you own your company, you have flexibility with that. But for the father who might work a 8 to 5 job Monday through Friday, if you're looking at dates, you might want to say, I'm going to look 9 months out. That way I can actually get the time off for this.
Absolutely.
But, a plan according to that still. Because you're going to have probably a great trip international.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love it if I was able to find. I still can't find, most of the tools I use don't give me like emergency, like tomorrow deals. I would love that, because we would take advantage of those. Typically for us though, we're looking 2 to 3 months out. But you're exactly right. Like, and the other thing is, there's things like Southwest is, you don't lose your credits with them. They don't expire. So let's say that you book a trip literally the day before the trip expires, you can be able to say, hey, you know what, I'm not going, and they'll give you credits for that. And the reason that's so important is because you need to pull the trigger quick if there's a great deal, right? Like if you see that there's something to Hawaii and there's dates that work, there are literally, in the course of like 2 hours of me looking at something and saying, I'm going to come back to that in 2 hours, and coming back to it, the things that worked perfect, like this Goldilocks scenario for me, disappeared. Wow. So like, on those, and any flight you schedule can be refunded up to 24 hours, right? So if you see something, this sounds weird, don't ask your spouse on it, just buy it, and then say, hey, I got these things, do you want to do this? Is it refundable? even if you aren't sure about schedules now, you got to be pretty tight on it. You can't like come back at 25 hours later and be complaining that you aren't getting your refund, because that's
Sure.
outside of the legal limits. But there's some really powerful things you can do to kind of protect those opportunities that come up without putting yourself in risk of losing the money you invested.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, and I know money's important to everybody, and I wish I had a friend who created software companies or something like that who would do something with travel, who likes to do it a lot. That'd be
That's
really
right.
cool and
That's right.
convenient for the rest of us. Hint, hint. But no, you've shared some really great stuff, and I really appreciate. I think that this is going to be helpful. I know it's going to be helpful to us. I think for me, still the key takeaway is the inspiration for why you do it all at the very beginning. Just having a life to look back on and say this was rich and this was full and it was chaotic, but we had a lot of fun along the way. So, last thing I'd like you to share, if there's anything, maybe just echoing something you've already said before, but is there any final word of encouragement that you'd like to give to parents, to dads who have kids who kind of dread traveling, and you would say, no, it's worth the chaos? What would you say?
Yeah. There are the moments, and I mentioned a couple of them to you, that you never forget. I One time, we were waking up. It was 3 a.m. Like it was like 3 a.m. to get up for a flight, and I got up my kids for the flight. And my I woke up my oldest or my second, I can't remember, but as I was waking them up, they said they opened their eyes and they said, "I know what this is," and they were just so excited to be going on a trip, right? And it became it's something that they always look forward to. Um, there are just those fun moments that happen in the process that you never get to build any other way, or it'd be difficult to replicate the exact moment in another way. Um, there can be a fear of traveling, and kind of that concern, that dread, as you described it, of traveling. But the benefits are they just so outweigh the memories you build. the the biggest thing is, those first couple times are going to be rough, so it's probably worth it to dread it. You're probably right. There's probably going to be the terrible twos hitting right at Disneyland, and then throwing up uh, of the chicken nuggets all over the plane. It's probably going to happen. But if you can get through that first time or two or three of traveling with your family and your kids, and the memories that you get out of it and the relationships that you get out of it, it makes such a difference. And the ability for your kids, to look at a map and to be able to know like places, and connect with places and understand cultures and people and languages, it it really gives them a purview, even within the United States. Forget traveling international, just the ability to be able to travel to different places and understand and see different cultures and different parts of the country that we're in. Not only does it create memories for your family, but it gives your kids perspective that wouldn't have happened if you kind of held it close, and you just held it close to the vest and said, you know what, we this is how we travel. We travel once every 3 years or whatever. So I really encourage you, if you want to, if it's something that you really want to, I really encourage you. It's kind of a bite the bullet situation. Get over the first or second time. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to be frustrated. Um, but making it through that leads to so many more memories, and the ability for you when you're older, exactly like you said, ending it how we started, for you, when you're older, to look back and be like, man, you remember that time when this thing happened in Costa Rica, or when the kids got to go down those slides when we were in the Dominican. That the ability to say, when everybody was locked down, Jamaica was not locked down, and we got to go, and like everybody's like shuttered in their house, and in July we went to Jamaica, and of 2020. And so
Wow.
for us, we had the choice. What are we going to do? Jamaica was open, and so for us, there's just those opportunities where we jumped on it, and we had memories from something, from hanging out on a lazy river and eating jerk chicken, that we just wouldn't have had if we just kind of like stuck in the house and avoided traveling during that time. So make those memories, but take the risks, but make the memories.
Yeah. Love that. Well, man, thank you so much for being with me and talking about traveling. You need to write a book about this.
I have a lot of people that tell us we need to create an Instagram account or something like that.
Yeah.
That kind of keeps up with everything happening.
Yeah. Fund all your trips.
That's true. It's a business, and then we'd be able to pay. There is a play there for sure.
All right, you're definitely the person who could do it. So, anyway, I hope you keep having fun traveling. Appreciate all your time, and we'll be in touch. We'll do it again. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Ryan O'Neal. I know you learned a thing or two from him, but what I want all of us to take away from this interview is the perspective that he shared, that he values as the reason as to why he wants to travel so much with his family. And that is when he gets to the end of his life, he doesn't want to look back and see void. He doesn't want to see regret. He doesn't want to see all of these what ifs. He wants to see a full and rich life that is flooded with moments and memories of him and his family. That is a perspective that we all need to have and we all need to value. This is Fathering Our Future, the podcast for dads. I'm Anthony Vandegrift. Thank you so much for being with me, and I hope you will join me next time. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, don't be shy. Please connect with Fathering Our Future on social media and become a part of the community that values fathers, that aims to help men love being dads and to help dads be better dads every day so that together we can better father our future.